Okay, thank you. Is recording started?
Thanks, Karthik. Yeah, so now we see that the VM is created, and now we are seeing the dashboard for the demo VM21 we just created. So we'll quickly look at the various tabs to make sure that everything is in order. So we see that the VM is up and running on the UK South region that we selected, on the subscription which we selected here. Now it's assigned as a public IP, which we can connect, or we can also configure a DNS name. So in case the public IP is not a permanent IP, it's a dynamic IP, so it could change every time we restart the PC or whatever. So we might want to configure a DNS name. So I'm going to configure one now. I just call it my demo VM. It has to be unique. So that the VM will get a DNS name called my demo VM, and if you see on the right here, .uksouth.cloudappazure.com. So I'm going to save it here and close the menu. Go back here. Now this will get refreshed in a bit. I'm going to refresh it, and then we'll see that now the VM has a permanent DNS name called my demo VM in under UK South. The tags are there, and you can go to the monitoring tab, and you'll see that it started generating some monitoring statistics already. This is the default monitoring which comes along with any VM. So the spike here means that, okay, this is the spike in the network when the VM is starting, and there is some disk usage as well. So this will keep on recording as we go along. Um, Now let's try and connect to the VM itself. So there is an option to connect here on the top. So you're presented with an RDP for a Windows connection. You can connect to Linux VMs using SSH, or a different service called Bastion. Bastion service allows you to access the VMs over the browser itself when you don't want to open up any ports on the any other port on the VM. But now we'll use the known option for RDP. So click on RDP. It invites you to download the RDP file, which is like the standard way how you connect to any VM. So I'm going to click on open on the RDP connection. It's going to use the standard Windows RDP option. I click on connect. Now it will ask me for the user ID which we just created. Okay, now it's going to open an RDP session. Okay, so it's created here. So the first time it starts, it's going to take a little bit longer because it's going to be creating your Windows user profile on the new Windows server. But since we've chosen a fairly a good spec VM, it's going to be pretty fast. So like this is going to be standard Windows stuff. Windows Server, when you create a new one, it opens up Windows Server Manager by default. And like we discussed earlier, we would want to assign this VM as a web server. So we will have to enable the IIS feature within this VM. Okay, the Windows Server is just loading. So what I'm going to do now is enable IIS on this Windows Server. So I'll click on Add Roles. Just go click on Next. I'm going to look for the service for Windows for the web server, IIS server. Again, if you want to specify this server as a FTP server or a DNS server, then you could just enable the respective services within the Windows server itself. Now I'm going to enable IIS and install it. Again, it's going to take about a minute or so to install this feature. So once Windows IIS, the Windows Web Server IIS server is installed, uh, the server will start accepting requests over port 80, which is the HTTP port. Let me open a browser now. We're still within the VM. So I'm going to open a browser and try to access it from within the browser, within the VM itself. So close it here and say localhost and hit enter. Okay, now we'll wait for the VM for the IIS service to start. We'll just wait for the service to start here. And once that is done, we will. So basically, what we have done now is we've logged in as an administrator using RDP, using the admin credentials from my local laptop. You could do that from anywhere on the internet because you have either using the DNS name or using the public IP, and then we'll be able to log in directly into the virtual machine as a remote desktop user. Okay, I think this is done now. So let me try. Okay, so now on port 80, it has discovered that the IIS server, the Internet Information Services, we're seeing this page, which means that the server is now accepting web requests over port 80. But now we're still inside the same VM. So what happens when we go out to the public internet here? I open a new tab and then try to, let me copy the DNS server, go back to the overview here. I'll copy the DNS name, I'll copy it here and try and access it over a public internet. So I have my own web server now, which is called mydemovm.uksouth.cloudapp.azure.com. It's still not able to connect to the server because now we've enabled the RDP port to connect into it to the port 3389, but we haven't enabled HTTP port. So now this is where network security group or NSG groups come into picture. So we can't access this because the web server is not allowing any traffic through port 80. So this is where we go now. Every VM is connected to the subnet through its NIC card or a network interface card. So when you look at the networking part here, so it says, okay, now we have access to port 300, which we've enabled for RDP, sorry, the port 3389, which we enabled for RDP, but we have to set a new inbound rule for accepting HTTP requests. So I'm going to add an inbound port rule here. The source is any, that means you can receive requests from anywhere anywhere in the internet, and the destination is again anywhere, but we're going to say the port is only the HTTP port, which is the port 80, and I'll rename the rule, say port 80 rule, and say add. So now it's updating the security rule, which is the network security group here for the VM, and you will see that once this rule is created successfully, and we refresh the screen, it's going to be, we're going to have a new entry here for refresh the screen by going to another. Yeah, so here we have the priority number 310 port 80. So now this VM should be accepting traffic over port 80. So let me go back to the browser screen and refresh. So now we are able to access the same IIS web server over the internet now that it's accepting port 80 requests. So now what we've proven is that now we are able to create within a few minutes a new Azure virtual machine, able to log in into it remotely, enable IIS, okay, and we are able to use from anywhere on the internet, able to browse it by opening the right firewall rules. Okay, now let me just go back to the portal here. A moment. The next thing we can try and do now is to resize the VM. So now initially I chose a D4 SV3 VM, which is quite an expensive VM. And if we don't see so much traffic coming in and out of the VM, we may not want to spend so much. Or so you may want to, based on the usage, initially you can start off with something big or small, and then based on how your usage is, you might want to resize the VM to either save on the cost or to improve performance and so forth. And Azure lets you do that elastically and easily. So I'm going to the size blade of the portal. So again, here it shows all the VM sizes available. Here it's showing me the D4 SV3, which is the selected VM, and the cost and the various parameters for the VM itself. Let's say I want to downgrade it to, let's say, a DS2 V2 VM, which is only half of what the capacity is in terms of vCPUs, which is only 2 vCPUs, and then it has only 7 gig RAM, and it costs much lesser than what it's costing currently. So all I have to do is select it here and then click on resize. So when you do a resize, then Azure it gets working on it straight away. It will update the resources within the virtual machine. This means that it will have to restart the server. So I will lose the RDP connection which I had previously because of the restart of the server. But you notice that, okay, if you want to resize the VM, it's fairly straightforward. You can again do all of these things programmatically as well. But you will see how simple it is that you just have to go and reduce or increase to a different level of VM sizing. Again, this is just showing all the premium, sorry, it's showing all the supported disks here. So initially, we have a 255 VM sizes options available to move out from here. Okay, now the resized VM is ready. So I'll just go to the virtual machine again. So now we see here it's become the standard DS2 V2 with 2 CPUs. Initially, we had started off with a 4 CPU vCPU VM, and I would have lost the RDP connection already. Let me just connect to it again. I'll do the exact same steps. Okay, just come up on the other screen, so I'm going to pull it in. Right. So now the server has restarted again now, and it's going to start your server manager. So and you'll see that it will be the new VM or the updated VM here. Another important feature which I want to show you today is resizing, we've seen the resize with adding of disks. Here, what we've done initially is just had the C drive, which is the OS drive, which is already there as default. Now, if you want to attach another data disk for either installing new applications or for storing data, you just have to go to the disks tab, and then click on create and attach a new disk. So when you click on this, it gives you an option to uh, specify any new volumes which you like to create. So I'll just call it volume 1. I'll leave it at premium SDD. So I'll say I want 100 gig, so I want 100 GB new disk, and it will still be the same platform manage encryption for it. As you'll see, any data disk you create will still be encrypted at rest, and you click on save. So now what it's doing is it's creating us a new data disk for the VM. So meanwhile, let me go into the RDP session here to see what's happening here. So I'm going to open a browser. So I'll just go to this PC. Now it just still shows only C drive. Again, D drive is the temporary storage which comes with any VM based on the based on our configuration, which is used for internally by the OS for paging, etc. But when we want to add a new data disk, it'll come as a E drive or an F drive. So, but we've created a new disk on our console, and it has attached a new data disk called volume 1. But we don't see that here because we'll have to create it again. So we'll have to allocate the disk into the VM. So we have managed disk. Now we'll have to allocate it. So I'll say format. I'll search for the service which will help me run the create and manage, create and format hard disk partitions. So it's already, when I open this is just basic Windows configuration. So when we open the disk management console, it already sees that there is a new disk which has been allocated to this VM. So I say, okay. So it's going to start allocation. So it shows the second disk, which is a 100 gig unallocated disk. So I right click, create a new simple volume. And then I say I want to allocate all of it, and we'll call it as a F drive. I'll assign an F allocated drive for this. Then do next, finish. And then in a moment, we'll see that the second disk will be allocated as a new disk for this VM, and it can be used for storing data. So now we see we have, along with C and D, we have a new F volume, which is about 100 gig of data storage. So now we've attached a new disk, and this server is ready to be used as a web server. It's got enough space to store any data or any code which you may want to store in this VM. Yeah. So now we have this. We've created this VM from scratch, and we've assigned basic diagnostics to it, assigned the required privileges to access it over the internet, and so forth. Again, what we don't have here is the is availability and scaling. So we chose not to put it as a part of an availability set or an availability zone because we are creating only one VM. But like what I showed you in the presentation initially, you can also create it as a uh, scale set, a virtual machine scale set. So that's another service which is built on top of the VM itself. So if you want to create a new virtual machine skill set, it is very similar to how you will create a VM, just that here you will specify how many VMs you would want to create as a part of a skill set. So it is, again, you select a subscription. I'm going to say the same uh, resource group which we created. Let's say test skill set as name of the skill set, and we can either choose the availability zones where you want to create the skill set, or you can let it be. Um, Again, you can say what size of VM you want to create. I'm going to create a very small one this time because I'm going to be creating several VMs of smaller sizes. Um, anyway, since we are kind of running out of time, I'm not going to be actually creating this scale set. I'll just show you all the options here. So you can enter your credentials to become an administrator, add data disks. That's how we do in a VM. Add the VM into a virtual network. We can use the existing virtual networks. And you can say the main part here is about scaling. So now you can say that when you say initial count is 2, that means you're going to start with 2 VMs at a minimum. And you could say what are the parameters on which you would like to scale out, scale up or scale down on the for the VMs. For example, now we say we start with minimum 1 instance of the VM. So that means that as soon as you create the scale set, 1 VM will get created, and up to based on the load or based on whatever parameters we specify, it can multiply and create up to 10 virtual machines. So scale out is when you're trying to, let's say when there is you could specify that if the CPU of the one VM you created crosses 75% threshold. So if the CPU is very busy, it's crossed 75 percentage of utilization for at least 10 minutes, then you increase it by one more. So basically you're adding some more compute power to your scale set. So once your first VM reaches 75 percentage, it's going to increase the number of instances by one more. So it'll become 2. And again, if both the instances become reach 75%, it's going to add 3 more. It'll keep on adding more and more until it's the maximum number of instances, which is 10. Similarly, when the workload is cooling off and CPU threshold goes back to reduces to 25%, it's going to start reducing the number of VMs slowly until it reaches the lowest, which is 1. So this is rest of the tabs in the scale set are very similar to the virtual machine. You can enable diagnostics. Of course, we have another additional parameter for health. So in case you want to put in enable health monitoring, so the scale set, if your scale set has 10 VMs and if any one of the VMs is going down, then you can monitor it actively for health, and then take it out of the scale set and replace it with a new VM. So this is basically about a virtual machine scale set. You can review and create, and then it's going to create with whatever scaling parameters you've given here. So I'll go back to my presentation here. So, so the summary, so what we've seen today is what an Azure VM is, what are the various types and sizes offered by Azure, what is the pricing model, reserved spot instances and pay as you go. And in the portal, we created a VM, did the network configurations and security groups, enabled encryption, connected to it via RDP. We resized the VM to a smaller instance and also added a data disk. And we briefly looked at the visual VM scale set. I understand it has been a bit of a rush with the amount of time we have, but I think I've covered most of the topics which I wanted to cover today. If any of you have any questions, I'm happy to take them on now. Karthik, is there anything else you would like to add on these topics?
No, not from me, Sandeep.
Hi, Sandeep.
Hello.
Hello, I have a question. Like, we are creating a VM, and for example, if I'm creating a same time and creating multiple VMs, accidentally, if I delete any one of them, instead of I want to delete a two and then I deleted the three, is there any recovery? Because it seems like lots of setting we are doing, and accidentally, if I delete, is there any available? For example, what I'm thinking is maybe a silly question, like you deleted a file, you can find in a recycle bin and then get back again, right? Like that. Is
Yeah.
there a whole settings after done? I just deleted accidentally, instead of two, I deleted three. It's just any recovery process. Just take the whole set.
Sure.
Sorry, Sandeep. So from last week we saw lots of governance controls, right? One of the controls we saw that log section. So you can
Yeah.
apply a log to the resource machines to avoid those kind of deletion.
So whenever you
And
create virtual machine and then complete the process and lock it again, lock
yes, that's
immediately.
correct. That's correct. And that from individual level, like if you are doing on personal note, you can use a lock and then you can lock it. But if for organizational level, we can apply that locking automatically through Azure policies or a blueprint. So these are the way to prevent accidental deletion. But the other option is in case you don't have the lock and you don't have the policy or blueprint, if it is deleted, then that's why we are using JSON files. So JSON files is a repeatable configurations. So
Okay,
once
you
you
can.
manually designed everything, you can take a Azure template JSON file and store it as your repository. So the source control, you can store it. So whenever
Okay.
you wanted to redeploy the same thing, you can simply run the JSON file. It's going to take like less than 5 minutes to spin up new VM.
Yeah. Another
So
option is, of course, if it's a critical workload, you could also create a backup or a VM snapshot on a regular basis. So you keep storing your backups in a certain location, and then you can use site recovery or other tools to recover recover a point in time recovery for those VMs as well.
okay, there are few ways to recover if you delete accidentally.
Yeah, but we'll have to specify those initially. Either like the option which Karthik mentioned, where you create it from JSON from the beginning, you're going to get a fresh VM. So you'll have the VM with all the settings, but you may not have the data. So if you still want to recover with the data and all the applications, then you'll have to make sure you have regular backups and snapshots created on a regular basis. You could do it once in an hour or once in a day, based on however critical you think your VM is. You could create point in time snapshots.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.